I'm going to do my recap of the Ravens draft in a different or unique way, at least for myself. Usually I would grab some pictures and use my rudimentary Photoshop skills to try to create something in Photoshop and then Adobe Premiere to record structured audio that I've typed out. This one's going to be a little bit more impromptu, so if I ramble, that's why. Um, Look, the Baltimore Ravens have constructed possibly a top 5 roster in the NFL, and that's with a potential relative weakness, if you want to say so, at wide receiver. And when I say relative weakness, what I mean is you've got different parts of the team that are clearly this team's strength. Starting with Lamar Jackson, number one. You have two of the best running backs in the NFL in terms of Edwards and Dobbins. You can say they're not better than this player and that player if you wish. Both of those guys average over 5.1 yards per carry. I don't know how you can say that's not among the best in the NFL. So relatively, they've got now, if you ask me, an extremely impressive lineup at offensive line. What they have done is they've gone out and tried to build a wall around Lamar. Tyler Linderbaum, the number one center in the draft, a great zone scheme guy, really good at pass pro. I've watched enough Tyler Linderbaum film earlier this morning to tell you he is everything as advertised. Daniel Falele, a good developmental prospect, if you ask me. Probably not going to see the field a whole lot in the first couple of years, depending on what happens with Ronnie Stanley, Jawan James, guys like that. Having said that, look, they've gone out there and they've turned wide receiver into a relative weakness, whereas before the draft you had Bateman and you had Brown for all his faults, which are obvious and I don't need to go into here. We did have a receiver core that was pretty damn good. You had two guys, Bateman and Brown, that were really solid number two options in the passing game, with Mark Andrews being number one. I believe that they've gone out in this draft and they've made this offensive line a priority and improved it dramatically. Now, where it could become elite is if Ronnie Stanley is back to full health. 100% full health Ronnie Stanley gives the Ravens absolutely unbelievable options along the offensive line. They can be a dominant run force and gap schemes or zone schemes. Much, night and day difference in pass pro from last season, where we had Villanueva on the left and then Patrick McCarry at right tackle. Now, I'm not denigrating Patrick McCarry because pre-injury last year in 2001, Patrick McCarry is pretty good in pass pro. Really good, in fact. The guy who struggled the most was our left guards, Cleveland and Powers, and then our center, Bozeman. Now Cleveland was a little bit inconsistent. There were some games where he played where he was real good in pass pro, and there were some situations where he struggled. Point being, a healthy Ronnie Stanley gives the Ravens options for one guy to really force competition at a high level, and that's Patrick McCarry. If they wanted to slide Patrick McCarry over to left guard and have him compete with Tyree Phillips and Ben Cleveland, for whatever reason, ESPN has Ben Cleveland as the backup right guard, even though Ben Cleveland played all left guard last year when he did see the field. If you get a competition between McCarry, Phillips, and Cleveland, whoever wins that competition is going to be elite and ready to go. This offensive line could be incredible if Ronnie Stanley's healthy. And if Ronnie Stanley and Jawan James are healthy, I don't know what you do. I mean, you have guys backing up tackles in McCarry and Jawan James who can do the job at the NFL. And then whoever gets the job at the left guard spot, Phillips, Cleveland, or as I mentioned, McCarry, you would have one or two capable guards sitting on the bench. Elite job by the front office. Eric DeCosta, I have no doubt that Ozzie Newsome played a huge role in all of this. Man, just a great job. Going back to the receiver thing, it's a relative weakness for their team. You have to admit that. And I hope that Duvernay and Prochet and Tylan Wallace do get their opportunities. I like Benjamin Victor. I remember him from preseason last year. If the Ravens go out, I believe that this is a top 5 roster in the NFL. What do you believe? Let's do it that way. Tell me in the comment section. Now, look, if it's not number 5, it's number 7, it's number 8, whatever. And when I say that, I'm talking about healthy Ravens roster. Other teams, let's evaluate the rosters on completely healthy. We know that Ojabo is going to be out for a while. We know that Bowser is probably going to be a slow return. So there is an issue there at the outside linebacker position early in the season, but damn sure not once they're healthy. Because when you got Bowser, Owe, and Ojabo, you have three really fantastic outside linebackers in a 3-4 structure. And I got news for you. Ty Bowser's going to start. You may not like that news, but when they're all three healthy, 2022, Ty Bowser's going to start. In any case, I digress. Defensively, the roster has been bolstered tremendously. I have a theory about what's happening in the draft, and you may as well. We didn't draft a single wide receiver to address, the relative weakness. And when I say relative weakness, I'm not being insulting. I'm just saying that relative to the other positions on the offense, wide receiver is our weakness compared to the offensive line, compared to the running backs, obviously compared to the quarterback. I haven't even really talked about Lamar at this point. Defensively, what's the relative weakness? I think it would be this linebacker core, which is nuts. Because you've got you got Queen, Owe, and Ojabo that are all three first-round picks in the last 3 years. And relative to the DB group down here and the interior D-line group, relatively, the linebacker core is the weakness. And it ain't much of one at all. It is not. Currently, I believe they're on round 5 of the draft. I'm trying to get this finished because I have some things to do around the house. The draft has dominated our household for 2.5 days. I'm sure it's done the same for you. DB core, unbelievable group. Unbelievable group. You're talking about Brandon Stevens, Darius Washington, and Geno Stone are, I don't want to say afterthoughts, but with a healthy Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey, how do we get Brandon Stevens on the field? We got to be in dime. Then Jalen Armour-Davis. Look, Chris Sims, who's one of the most respected NFL evaluators, if you ask me. I don't think he has a single amount of bias in him to players from certain schools or players from certain regions. He's a former quarterback, obviously, who I don't think is biased towards the offense when he evaluates things. There are some people who evaluate things and they have glowingly great things only to say about quarterbacks. Because the quarterback's the guy with the ball in his hands all the time. It's easy to look at the quarterback and say good things about certain quarterbacks because they have the goddamn ball in their hands most of the time. It's more difficult to say much about the right guard or right tackle. It's more difficult to say something about an inside linebacker and his technique. And Chris Sims does it all. And Chris Sims, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Chris Sims said that Jalen Armour-Davis might be one of the top 5 corners in this draft. And if I'm wrong there, then I'm being emphatic for no reason. But I believe he said he was a potential top 5 corner in this draft. I did not watch his video on the top 5 corners in the draft. I seem to recall him tweeting that he thought Jalen Armour-Davis was in the top 5 corners in this draft. And that's unbelievable because we got him in round 4. Just like we got Travis Jones in round 4. These 3 guys here, those 3 right there, could be a start. They could be starters at the interior defensive line in a 3-4 structure. They could. Justin Madubuike, if you ask me, is a starter. Travis Jones is a starter. I think it's possible Derek Wolfe, we're going to move on from him. Clearly, Michael Pierce and Calais Campbell got unbelievable amount of talent. So glad we brought Calais Campbell back this season. I'm moving down through the roster. If we get these 2 guys healthy, Peters and Humphrey, and they make it to the regular season completely healthy, our DB core, if you ask me, is among the top 3 in the league. No question. Now, can we match up with the big dog? And if you don't know who the big dog is, he's not real tall, but he's the man in the AFC North. He has totally changed the dynamic in the AFC North, and I don't mean to denigrate Joe Burrow at all, but the guy who makes the Bengals go offensively clearly is the man that we have to figure out a way to limit because we did not do so last year. But everybody else had trouble with him too, right? This DB core can match up from a zone perspective, from a man perspective in certain instances. We're not going to be bringing so much 5 and even 6-man pressure schemes to try to get at the quarterback, which was nonsensical against Joe Burrow anyway, because most of the time he's getting the ball out quick. He's throwing 3-step goes and 3-step fades, so it's kind of like one of those situations where bringing 5 or bringing 6 doesn't even make sense against Joe Burrow all the time. Moving down the roster and still talking about some of the guys that were drafted on, I moved past the tight ends intentionally because I'm going to come back there in a minute. We went and drafted a punter. He's a phenom from Penn State. I watch a lot of Penn State stuff. I have a lot of all 22 Penn State saved up. I got Big Ten Network Plus, so I'm able to watch any game I want, any Penn State game I want. And this guy's a phenom. We may be getting rid of Sam Cook, and I don't mean getting rid of by cutting, even though we would save $2.1 million. He may be into a forced retirement situation, and it might be one of the things where Sam Cook wanted to retire. Hey, maybe he wanted to retire. He's done this a long time, right? And he's been a great Raven from a special teams perspective. Maybe he's going to retire gently because we've drafted another punter and we saved $2.1 million. Let me move back up. I'm going to get to a point here. It's about the receiver thing. Derek Wolfe is another one. Now, I don't know what the dead cap hit or what the cap hit is if we cut him. Maybe it's some huge number, so that's why we haven't cut him already. But I believe that post June 1st, certain things change, so maybe Derek Wolfe's going to be a cap casualty. I could be wrong. And then the other guy, and this one sounds tough to say, in some ways the same as Sam Cook, but in some ways it's different. We drafted 2 tight ends, both of whom are talented. If you don't know much about Charlie Kolar or Isaiah Likely, who's not listed here, they don't have Isaiah Likely listed on this website yet. They're both talented. Isaiah Likely's more a receiver than a tight end. College defenses treated him like a receiver schematically. They were in nickel a lot of times against Coastal Carolina. And if you don't know much about Coastal Carolina, if you just think it's some small school, man, you are dead wrong. College and high school coaches all across the country look at Coastal Carolina's offense because it's very unique. They run a lot of zone option stuff, RPO stuff. Their quarterback, tremendously talented. I believe he was only a 2 or maybe a 3-star out of high school, but has turned himself into a wonderful college quarterback, very talented. Drafting Kolar and Isaiah Likely, it could push Nick Boyle out, depending on what we would gain salary structure from getting rid of him. And I don't mean to be disrespectful towards him. I'm just being brutally honest. That's the way that I am. That's the way that I was built. The other guy, if he's not completely healthy, will be Jawan James. I wonder about him possibly being out the door. 2 of those 4 guys I mentioned, Cook, Wolfe, James, and Boyle, I don't know what salary we could recoup or what gain there would be in terms of salary structure. 2 of them, 3 of them, 4 of them, you might be talking about enough money for the Ravens to trade for a receiver that we want, that we all want. And there's 2 of them. They got the same agent, apparently. I would advocate for DK Metcalf because he's a 1-year solution, if you ask me. Next year we'll be drafting at 32 anyway, so I don't mind trading away pick number 32. I don't have, and I'm a defensive person. First and foremost, I say that all the time on my videos. I have a defensive mentality. I've been a Ravens fan for a long time, so even if I wasn't a defensive coach, I would have. Most of us that are Ravens fans have a defensive mentality. It would throw this roster all off. It would make unquestionable. If you put DK Metcalf up here, it turns this roster into the number 1 roster in the NFL. Number 1. Now the question is, are you willing to get rid of some talent on our end? The answer is no. Rashad Bateman, hell no. No. Any of our other talent? No. If you subscribe to the theory that the Ravens drafted a couple of those guys in the 4th round to trade to Seattle, I don't know enough to say whether that's a great theory or not, but I have a couple friends who have that theory that we were drafting for Seattle because that trade's coming. Who knows? I really don't think so. I don't think it's coming immediately. I think it could be the backup plan because I've gone on record as saying I thought the Ravens was going to draft Jameson Williams at 14 anyway if he was there. They have their board. Kyle Hamilton got drafted according to their board. If Kyle Hamilton is gone, excuse me, let me rephrase. If Jameson Williams is there at 14, it means Kyle Hamilton's probably already been drafted. So they would take Jameson Williams. Now, if you had Jameson Williams, Jordan Davis, and Kyle Hamilton all available to you at 14, which didn't happen, but if let's just say under some crazy scenario it was the situation, I think it's entirely possible the Ravens were taking Jameson Williams. I do. I think they were trying to address receiver at 14, and I think they were doing that because it was a unique situation in terms of where we drafted 14. This football team was 8-3 last year at one point with a decimated roster, decimated by injuries. And the guy on the right-hand side of the screen had carried us to be an 8-3 somehow, still being the number 1 seed in the AFC. Unbelievably, that's what we had done. So having said all that, adding a guy like a DK Metcalf or even Deebo Samuel would totally make this the number 1 roster in the NFL. Absolutely, without question, if you ask me. Would I be willing to give up one of these running backs? I mean, maybe. I got to admit, maybe, if that's what they wanted in return. But Seattle just drafted a running back, and they've got 2 other running backs that eat up salary for them. Penny, and I forget the other guy. So they've currently got 2 running backs that eat up, I think, $11 million in salary for next year, and they've got a running back they just drafted. Really weird stuff they're doing, if you ask me. I love what the Ravens did at tight end. Isaiah Likely is a receiving tight end. Charlie Kolar is a little more balanced, but he's a pretty good receiving tight end, even though he's not the vertical threat that Isaiah Likely is. Isaiah Likely, man, look up some highlights from Coastal Carolina. Very athletic. What I love about what the Ravens did in terms of tight end, they can go 12 personnel, and I've put this on Twitter multiple times today. They can go 12 personnel, and their 12 personnel can be 11 personnel. Because Andrews can slide over to receiver, Likely can slide over to receiver. Now, some people say, well, couldn't we do that with Josh Oliver? Josh Oliver is not the level of athlete that Isaiah Likely is. Go watch some of the film. Go watch what Coastal Carolina did with him. Isaiah Likely is a tight end / receiver hybrid, if you ask me. Along the lines of Andrews from the standpoint that, really, let's be honest, Andrews is a receiving tight end. Charlie Kolar is more of a 50-50 balanced tight end. Andrews is a 75-25 receiver to tight end. Isaiah Likely is a 65-35 receiver to tight end type guy. I love the offensive line. Love what they did with the tight ends. We didn't address running back. Hopefully we give this guy an opportunity early in the season if Gus and or JK can't go. I know McCrary's out there as well. I think the roster is elite. I do. I think the roster is elite. Now they just got to get healthy. Hopefully that happens as soon as possible, Lord willing. I don't want to see Ojabo and Bowser rush back. Certainly don't want to see Ronnie Stanley rush back. I think they drafted some backup plans, some security plans with Falele coming in at offensive line. Juwan James is clearly a security blanket if he's healthy for Ronnie Stanley. Ravens are on the comeback. There can be no question. I don't know what other people are saying. Now, having said that, do I think they killed the 4th round like they killed round 1, 2, and 3? No, I don't. I think they did quite well. I think the guy in 4th round that might be the most impactful in some ways is Jalen Armour-Davis because of the talent level he has, where he played, and the way he was coached. He was coached at Alabama. Nick Saban is a DB guy. He's a DB. He is an absolute DB guy, absolute coverage guys. Him and Belichick worked together when they were with the Browns in the 90s. They did a lot of revolutionary things on defense. Maybe not with the Browns necessarily, but after that time period they left, and they've done so many things that have been copied or rebranded by people since then. And Jalen Armour-Davis went through that system. I know there was other guys that were more talented and better than him at Alabama, but good football player. Lest we forget, Anthony Averett was not one of the best corners at Alabama when he was there in college either. Great job by the front office, if you ask me. I feel like something's coming at the receiver position, but who knows? Maybe the Ravens don't want to deal with that agent that's Deebo Samuel's agent. I think he's DK Metcalf's agent. I believe he might be Marquise Brown's agent as well, but I could be wrong. Maybe nothing gets done because of that. And if that's the case, Ravens are probably going to look at a guy like Jarvis Landry in free agency, maybe Julio Jones to see what he's got left. I would be okay with that, taking a flyer on him. You tell me what will be wrong with looking at Julio Jones or Jarvis Landry now in 2022 when a year ago we were all excited about us signing Justin Houston and Sammy Watkins. And Sammy Watkins is a good football player. Justin Houston is too. He's got 100 sacks in the NFL. That's freaking unbelievable. Having said that, Julio Jones compared to Sammy Watkins, I would like to see us take a shot at him. Jarvis Landry, equivalent to Sammy Watkins, if you ask me. At the outside linebacker position, nothing will be wrong with us bringing back Pernell McPhee and Justin Houston and letting them know up front, hey, we might not have a spot for you once Ojabo and Bowser is completely healthy. But weeks 1 through 6, here's your opportunity to show us what you got. It's entirely possible that that happens. Pernell McPhee is a Raven, period, on the Super Bowl team, period. Just like the guy I have spot shadowed there, Josh Bynes. Jimmy Smith coming back at DB obviously does not look like it's going to occur, being as how many DBs we've drafted. I love what the Ravens did in this draft. I, like some of you, am a little bit confused about not going after any receivers. Justin Ross seemed like a natural fit. Jalen Tolbert, I thought, would have been a good one at 76. But we got a hell of a player at 76. You guys let me know what you think of the draft, what you think of some of my thoughts in the comment section. I will be up front. This is the first time that I've really taken close looks at the draft, tried to evaluate the draft. And so if there's elements that I missed, let me know. I do think that something is in play when we draft a punter, when we draft so many tight ends in the 4th round for depth, and when we go ahead and get Travis Jones, and we appear to have enough depth with Matabike, Pierce, Campbell, Mack, who's a pretty good football player, Washington, who's a good football player, and presumably Derek Wolfe, if he's able to return to full health. I feel like something is at play. We drafted guys that make it appear as if we're going to let loose some salary for whatever reason. Let me know what you think of that thought or how I evaluated the draft in the comments section. I appreciate all the comments you guys have done on my channel in the last 3 days. It's been a whole lot of fun. I hope to get one more video out before the end of the night tonight before watching the fights. Appreciate you guys. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the video if you enjoy the content.